In the isolated Spiderhead prison, an inmate agrees to undergo drug experiments on himself. As the drug is injected into his body, no matter how heartbreaking or heavy the news he hears, he can only burst out laughing. When the experiment ends, this drug is named Lafadil. It is declared a success. Besides this, there are dozens of other emotion-controlling drugs awaiting these inmates. The prisoner Jeff is taken outside the island, and after being injected with the drug, all he sees is an unparalleled, beautiful landscape. The drug, Verbalusa, allows him to clearly express all his feelings. But in reality, what lies before him is just a construction site. He has never refused to participate in the drug experiments, because he feels he should pay the price for the mistakes he made in the past. He once had a girlfriend he loved deeply, but after a party, he drove drunk with his friends, ultimately crashing into a tree and causing a tragedy. This became a lifelong nightmare that haunts him. A new day arrives, and Jeff faces a new round of experiments. The person in front of him is also an inmate, but the two have never interacted before. Sitting across from each other, they feel no fondness. If anything, there is a hint of dislike. But after Steve orders his assistant to inject them with the drug, the two suddenly develop an inexplicable attraction. As the dosage increases, their desires grow stronger and stronger, until they throw caution to the wind, entangling with each other and speaking openly in front of everyone. This drug is called Love-Actin. Even after the experiment, the two remained in each other's arms, which was exactly what Steve wanted. Next, he needed to test the residual effects of the drug. However, as soon as the injection stopped, the two immediately returned to normal. Back at his post, Jeff looked at Liz, the woman he secretly liked, and felt nothing but guilt. But when facing Heather, all he felt was awkwardness. The next day, the woman in front of him was replaced by his fellow inmate Sarah. The procedure was the same, and so was the result, except that the dosage for both of them was doubled. Today was the day to switch to a new drug. The assistant, Mark, collected and replaced the drug vial from the pack on Jeff's lower back, reminding him to avoid physical contact or bumping into each other's packs during the experiment. Otherwise, it could lead to an overdose or risk of drug confusion. As a reward for good behaviour, Jeff requested to be transferred away from Liz. On this day, the experiment involved two women sitting face to face. However, the real focus of the experiment was Jeff, who was in the observation room. He originally thought he was just there to watch a good show, but unexpectedly, Steve made him decide which of the two women would receive the dose of the depressant. It was a drug filled with negative emotions, and the terrible, horrifying experience it brought was unforgettable. But Jeff was unwilling to choose. The passion he once felt had faded, and now he had no feelings for either woman. He simply didn't want them to go through such a terrifying ordeal. Steve tried to persuade him, saying that the experiment everyone was participating in could help countless people find happiness. Of course, Jeff also hoped that day would come soon, so that he could find redemption as well. Finally, it was Jeff's turn for his day out. Besides being able to relax outdoors for a whole day, he also had the chance to use a phone freely. For the countless time Jeff called his girlfriend, but he always got nothing but the automatic reply from her voicemail. This time, Jeff let go. He admitted to himself that he had fallen for Liz, who was in the same group, and that it was time to start something new. The experimental subject across from him today took Jeff by surprise. He couldn't imagine what terrifying things the love drug might make them do, but Steve gave no response at all. After a long wait, Steve announced that the experiment was over. Jeff immediately realized what had happened and rushed into the observation room. As it turned out, the main subject of today's experiment wasn't them, but Heather. It was obvious that she had gone through the same experience as that strong man. Steve had no choice but to confess that it was the city planning committee that forced him to do this. In fact, everyone in the prison had participated in the love drug experiment. In fact, everyone had already taken turns being exposed to it, and Jeff could hardly believe it. This was clearly a ruthless violation of human ethics. But Steve explained that everyone had volunteered for the experiment. Even though this place was called a prison, where else could you find such a free and happy prison? He said he had gone against pressure from above and made an exception to provide everyone with such a good life. Maybe you've just gotten used to enjoying it. The very concept of prison had already become blurred. This experiment was the price everyone had to pay, or you could say, their punishment. Of course, Jeff understood everything he was saying. It was just that the fear of almost being injected with the Darkenflox had clouded his mind. A long time passed after that, and life went on as usual. The relationship between Jeff and Liz gradually deepened. Steve scoffed at his assistant's idea of selling Lafadil to comedians. What he pursued was something ultimate, something that concerned the fate of the world. To achieve such a grand goal, of course, required an attitude of, if not me, then who? For example, using himself as a test subject. Jeff happened to witness this scene, and Steve ordered him to participate in the experiment. The City Planning Committee was not satisfied with the experimental conditions Steve had set at the time. They also didn't believe that Jeff had no lingering feelings for the two of them, so they specifically arranged today's experiment. Steve wanted Jeff to watch Heather being injected with the depressant right before his eyes, and at the same time, he wanted Jeff to express his true feelings under the influence of the Verita serum. The reason for not choosing someone else was that Jeff's outstanding ability to articulate himself was a perfect fit for the entire experimental process. However, no matter what, Jeff simply could not agree to this experiment. With no other options, Steve had to resort to every possible means to make Heather's egregious crimes seem like the result of his own painstaking efforts. He also brought up how he had once cared for Jeff with meticulous attention, even going so far as to threaten to take away his free day. At last, Jeff relented, but only on the condition that Steve make one final phone call to confirm. However, after leaving the room, Steve didn't contact the committee at all. He simply poured himself a cup of coffee and took the opportunity to chat idly with Liz. He then returned straight to the observation room and told Jeff that the committee insisted on proceeding with the test and that refusing would mean being sent back to a regular prison. He had no choice but to agree to let a small dose of the depressant be injected into Heather's body. She immediately showed intense discomfort, and the pain she felt inside made her beg Steve to stop the experiment. Her agitation and anxiety even led to physical symptoms. Under the influence of the truth serum, Jeff kept expressing his sympathy and reluctance, but there was not a trace of love in his words. At this point, Heather was already on the verge of a breakdown. She kept banging on the glass and even threw herself against the wall, which caused her portable device to malfunction. By the time the assistant noticed, the dosage was estimated to have already exceeded the maximum injection limit. Affected by this, Heather also became extremely aggressive. He tried everything he could to end the pain, but nothing worked, so he could only seek to end it himself. This was the first time the experiment had resulted in a fatality. Extremely anxious, Steve rushed over to check, unaware that Jeff had already picked up the keys he had dropped. While the two were examining Heather, Jeff hurriedly rifled through the research documents in the drawer, and the company letterhead bearing Steve's last name immediately caught his eye. A nearly completed bingo game card also appeared, with each number corresponding to a successful drug. Only 2 spots remained empty. One was for the B40 Dragon Drive currently being tested, and the other, B61, had always been in his own bag. But there had never been any record of his own experiments. In his anxiety, Steve suddenly realised that Jeff, who was alone in the observation room, had also seen him hurrying back on the surveillance cameras. Jeff quickly restored everything to its original state and tossed the key back before Steve returned. Steve thought Jeff's panic was out of fear and kindly offered him comfort, but he had no idea of the real reason. What kind of secret had Jeff discovered? This unexpected turn of events also left a significant shadow in the assistant's heart. But to achieve great things, sacrifices must be made. Steve promised to give him some time off to relax afterward. As for the deeply shaken Jeff, since words couldn't ease his mind, perhaps something more stimulating would help, like the effect of a cheerful drink. And so, the two of them shared a drink together. They laughed heartily. Even when talking about being abandoned as a child, Steve couldn't stop laughing, and it wasn't until the effects of the cancelled injection wore off that they finally calmed down. But as the experiment progressed into its later stages, Steve's methods became increasingly inhumane. He actually injected Liz with the obedience drug, terrifying her so much that she cowered in the corner. Not even the truth serum could get her to express how she felt. She just kept begging for the things on the table to be taken away. And what frightened her so much was nothing more than a stapler. After the experiment ended, Liz went to Jeff to pour out her feelings. She would rather stay in a regular prison and be bullied than go through this. She would rather not be scared half to death by a stapler here. Of course, Jeff understood that kind of pain all too well, but the question was, why did everyone eventually agree to participate in the experiment? Was it really just for a private room, a few games and a day of recreation? For Jeff, he agreed in order to punish himself because on that day, besides his friend, his girlfriend was also in the car. The moment he discovered his friend had died, he froze and as a result, missed the best chance to save his girlfriend. By the time he snapped out of it, it was already too late. The car was engulfed in flames after a violent explosion, and he could only watch helplessly as his girlfriend died right in front of him. All these years he kept calling her number over and over, just for a sliver of comfort. But now he has found his own redemption. In the dim light, the two of them opened up to each other and finally confirmed their feelings of love. Afterward, they shared a sweet and intimate night together. The next morning, they happened to run into Steve, who was grabbing a snack. When they answered him in unison, Steve's eyes lit up. He realized they liked each other. Their habits and behaviors also began to align with each other. This was exactly the result he had hoped to see from his earlier experiments. By investigating Jeff's room late at night, he finally confirmed where Jeff's feelings lay. And today's experiment, ordered by the committee, was for Jeff to watch Liz get injected with the depressant, although Steve claimed this would be the last time the depressant was used. But Jeff stubbornly refused to participate in the experiment. He was determined not to let Liz suffer even the slightest bit, and even became furious over it. Steve had no choice but to let him go back and think it over for a night, but secretly instructed his assistant to increase the dosage. The assistant, following orders, went to Jeff's room. When Jeff casually asked about the red drug, the assistant became extremely nervous and simply explained that it was a placebo. But Jeff didn't believe for a second that the so-called committee even existed. This prison was actually Steve's private facility, and those code names were nothing more than bingo numbers. Not to mention all the experiments about love and all the drugs were just to serve the red drug. How could you willingly be an accomplice to such things? The assistant tried to repeat the usual brainwashing rhetoric about benefiting humanity, but Jeff turned the argument back on him. There's more than one way to benefit humanity. After a night passed, Jeff faced the final choice as expected. The assistant had called in sick the night before, so today it was just the two of them involved. In Liz's bag was the last remaining vial of Darkenflox. All the others had already been destroyed by Steve. It was time to put a complete end to the experiment. Jeff took the phone but still gave a refusal, which made Steve furious and powerless. In a place without law or morality, your little bit of love is utterly insignificant. What if I told you that Liz is a murderer? Under his command, Liz finally revealed the truth. Many years ago, she was rushing to work. She forgot her young daughter in the car. In the scorching heat of July, the little girl didn't make it. Liz was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced accordingly. She agreed to participate in the experiment and willingly accepted her punishment, believing she deserved it all. In the end, Jeff initiated the injection procedure, and Steve beamed with joy, finding the whole scene so amusing, unaware that it was Jeff who had injected him with the love drug. Next, he wanted Steve to experience the effects of the hallucinogen. Steve abruptly stopped, and feeling extremely uncomfortable, immediately realized what was happening. The sight of Jeff filled him with terror. However, Jeff didn't lay a hand on him. He simply tapped the screen to inject him with the depression agent. In the midst of extreme agony, Steve realized that his personal pouch had been switched, and Jeff admitted it as well. His personal pouch had been emptied. At this moment, the assistant was arriving with a large group of police officers, explaining everything from a position of superiority, just as Steve used to do. The so-called B6, she said, does not affect a person's emotions like happiness, anger, sorrow or joy, but rather makes people obey orders. All the tests were just a cover, merely to verify whether people would follow orders when under the control of their emotions and desires. Every detail was hidden within each command Steve had given in the past. It all seemed calm and effortless on the surface, yet without exception, every prisoner chose to comply. And the name Steve left for him was obedient as a stream. He was indeed effective. Even the most heinous criminals could live together under his command. But Steve still didn't award him the gold star, simply because he was still flawed. Under Jeff's orders, he finally revealed the truth. The experiment showed that, when faced with the choice of harming someone they love, people would defy orders at all costs. Yet what he wanted to create was a world of absolute obedience. If everyone were like this, there would never be any crime again. Jeff had actually completed his sentence 7 months ago, and Liz had also successfully appealed just last week. Furious, Jeff ordered him to end the experiment and let everyone go, but his orders had no effect at all. All because, to Steve, this experiment was the love of his life. The two of them immediately broke out into a fierce fight. Steve snatched the phone and injected all the depressants into Liz, then smashed the phone outright. Enraged, Jeff lunged forward and in the struggle broke Steve's bag. At this point, Liz was in excruciating pain and seemed about to follow in Heather's footsteps, but fortunately, Jeff managed to subdue Steve in time. Thinking of mushrooms, they immediately pulled themselves out of danger. The two supported each other as they escaped from the lab. Once Steve recovered, he ordered everyone to act. Because the two had rebelled, this paradise was about to be shut down by the police. The damaged bag, combined with the effects of various drugs, left him delirious, but he still forced himself to hold on until the end, demanding that everyone immediately start a manhunt. The entire facility instantly descended into chaos, and former prison mates all became enemies. The two worked together to evade the relentless pursuit, while Steve grabbed the remaining drugs and headed for the plane. Under the influence of multiple drugs, his emotions kept shifting. Joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness all appeared on his face at once. It was as if his mind had fallen into an endless state of bliss. The plane crashed straight into the mountainside, but in those final moments, he experienced a peace he had never felt before. The police fleet headed towards Spiderhead Prison, while the two inmates who should have been released long ago were embracing the most precious freedom. The film ends,